day is it today? May 25th. So I will begin with a land acknowledgement, and at this time I'd like to acknowledge that we meet on the traditional land of Treaty 6 territory in the Métis homeland, and acknowledge the diverse Indigenous peoples whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territory for centuries, such as the Cree, the Dene, the Saulteaux, the Blackfoot, Nakota Iska, as well as Métis and Inuit, and now settlers from around the world. I will do a roll call of committee members. First, starting with, is Mayor Knack joining us today? Okay. Councillor Salvador?
Good morning.
Councillor Clark?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Councillor Jans?
Good morning.
And now Councillor Paquette.
Sorry, good morning.
Okay. And then we are also joined in the beautiful River Valley room by Councillor Morgan.
Morning.
Councillor Wright.
Good morning.
Okay, and I'm just checking online to see who else is in it. So just give me Councillor Stevenson.
Good morning.
Councillor Principe.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And Councillor Tang is there too. Yep, perfect. And Councillor Elliott.
Good morning.
Good morning. So we got quite a full contingent today, which is understandable. It's an important big items. And now I will do the declaration of pecuniary interest. So before we begin today's agenda, I will ask all members of council present if they have any pecuniary or conflicts of interest to declare regarding any of the items to be discussed. A pecuniary interest exists when an item could monetarily affect a member of council, their employer, or a family member. A conflict of interest exists when the item could affect a private interest of a member of council, their employee, or a family member. Do any members of council have a pecuniary or conflict of interest to declare? Hearing no declaration of pecuniary or conflict of interest, we will move on to adoption of the agenda. Councillor Salvador?
Yeah, I'll move that the May 25th, 2026 Infrastructure Committee meeting agenda be adopted with the following change: the addition of 7.1 Central Area Bridge Renewal Update.
Thank you. Any questions on that agenda? If not, I don't see anybody jumping to the mic. Please vote.
I'm a yes.
Thank you, Councillor Salvador. We have all the votes.
Please display the votes. And that is carried. Councillor Salvador? Would you like to move the minutes?
Yeah, I'll move the approval of the minutes from the April 8th, 2026 Infrastructure Committee meeting.
Are there any errors or omissions in the previous minutes? Seeing none, please vote.
I'm a yes.
Thank you. We have all the votes.
Please display the votes. And that is carried. And there are no council protocol recognition items that I'm aware of. Looking to committee, nope. Okay, so we will select items for debate. Would anyone like to select 7.1?
Sure, I'll take it.
Jans? Sounds good. So 7.1 is selected. We don't have any other items that are not selected for debate. And Councillor Clark, would you like to move the speaker request to speak list?
Oh, sorry if I could just interrupt. There's the revised due date request to reschedule.
Oh, sorry. Yes, yes, there is. Sorry. So we will. Oh yes, the total cost of ownership update. That wasn't selected. Okay, I'll move all items not selected for debate. Please vote on that.
We have all the votes.
Yep, please display the votes. And Councillor Clark, would you like to move the speakers list?
Thank you. Yeah, sure thing. I'll move that from 7.1, the Central Area Bridge Renewal Update. Do you want me to read out the speakers? We should read out. There's 4 speakers, and I'll read them out. First one, Kyle Sholey. He is remote. 2, Ryan Jacques, Pass for People, remote. Number 3, Nathan Binneman. Nathan, I got actually, Nahin Bin Nama. Okay, he's remote as well. And then number 4 is David Redley from the Edmonton Heritage Council, and he is in person. There he is. There are the speakers. Thank you.
Great, so we'll vote on hearing from those speakers in panels where appropriate. Please vote.
We have all the votes.
Please display the votes. And that is carried. Okay, and we have no request for time specific on the agenda. Are there any council inquiries? I don't believe I received any, so not aware of any. Reports to be dealt with at a different meeting, none. Requests for rescheduled reports, we've already dealt with because it wasn't selected. Unfinished business, none, so we will move on to public reports. But before we do, I want to just go over the process. So for each item, administration will provide opening remarks or a presentation. Members of the public approved to speak will then be invited to make their presentations. Speakers will be heard in panels, and each speaker will have 5 minutes to present. The clerk will run the official timer in the meeting room, and it will display in the virtual meeting. The light will be green for the first 4 minutes, turn yellow when there is 1 minute remaining, and flash red when the 5 minutes are up. When everyone in your panel has had a chance to present, members of council may ask questions of you or your panel. For this reason, please remain in the meeting until all questions have been asked of your panel. If you're participating virtually, please mute your microphone when you are not speaking. If you are experiencing any technical difficulties, please reach out to the Office of the City Clerk using the contact information provided in your confirmation of registration or at city.clerk@edmonton.ca. If you are here in person, city staff will guide you to your seat when it is time for your panel. And with that, we will begin with a presentation from City Administration. Please take it away.
Good morning, committee. The report in front of you today shares the long-term future strategies for several bridges in Edmonton's central area, including the high-level bridge, the low-level bridges, and the Dawson Bridge. These bridges are essential parts of Edmonton's transportation network. Every day, tens of thousands of people rely on them to travel across the river by vehicle, transit, bicycle, walking, and wheeling. The report outlines the current condition of these bridges, the ongoing work to keep them safe and in service, and the long-term planning that will be required as these structures continue to age. The bridges remain safe to use. The city continues regular inspections, maintenance, and rehab work to ensure they continue operating safely and reliably. Pascal Ladouceur and Natalie Lazurko from Infrastructure Planning and Design will now walk through the analysis outcomes and next steps. Thank you.
Good morning. Also joining us are Jason Melista, also from Infrastructure Services, and Caitlin Zerbeski from our City Operations team. The high-level and low-level bridges are nearing the end of their service lives, which is typically a lifespan of 75 to 100 years. Administration has been working on their planned renewal, completing technical studies and on-site testing. The analysis completed confirms that the best course of action for both bridges is replacement and eventual decommission, supported by proactive maintenance and monitoring in the interim. Additionally, a network analysis confirmed that replacing both crossings is critical for future connectivity, effective growth management, and Edmonton's economic well-being. The implementation of this strategy will require an estimated $1.3 billion in investment between 2027 and 2036. This work builds on years of bridge renewal and rehabilitation work. Over the past several years, the city has invested significantly in maintaining and renewing our infrastructure, including the Walterdale Bridge, the Groat Road Bridge, and ongoing work on Wellington Bridge, Dawson Bridge, and the Low Level Bridge, which is why several of them have remained operational well beyond a typical bridge life cycle. The high-level and low-level bridges have provided an enormous amount of value to Edmontonians over the past 100+ years and are vastly important to the economic heart of the city.
The high-level bridge is 113 years old and currently carries 24,000 to 27,000 southbound vehicles per day across the river. In 2022, City Council approved the initial plan for the high-level bridge. This included $200 million in the 23 to 26 capital budget for the rehabilitation scope. Design work and technical assessments have since advanced, including expertise from various external subject matter experts. These assessments found the bridge condition to be worse than previously understood. The review showed some bridge elements require more extensive rehabilitation or replacement, while others are more complex. The rehabilitation would include extensive environmental requirements, extensive traffic disruption, and additional schedule and cost. At 113 years old, the rehabilitation is high risk and high cost. The rehabilitation work would also require extended durations of closure, resulting in significant disruption for all users of the bridge. Based on the information that we have today about the bridge condition and the rehabilitation work required, the cost would exceed the approved budget and in the long term is fiscally impractical. The findings led us to evaluate a new strategy for the high-level bridge. Over the course of the past few years, we've reviewed the benefits and costs of several options for the high-level bridge. This slide shows a sample of some of the options explored. First, full rehabilitation. This would require us to increase the budget to approximately $380 million. With rehabilitation that would take several years to complete, the bridge could remain in service for another 25 years, at which point a similar or greater investment would be required for further renewal if it's even feasible at that time. Next is the recommended option. This would include investing in a monitoring and maintenance plan now while we're preparing for the decommissioning of the bridge within the next 10 to 15 years. We also explored a renewal within the $200 million budget. This would limit the life extension up to 25 years with frequent repairs anticipated. After this time, decommissioning would be required. Knowing the significance of the high-level bridge, administration, with our external experts, also seriously explored the option of repurposing the high-level bridge for active mode uses. Since the scope of work for this necessary rehabilitation and ongoing maintenance are similar to the options for preserving vehicle traffic in the streetcar, this option was not pursued further. The costs of these options don't paint the full picture. They do not account for the existing bridge's heritage contribution. The costs also don't consider the limitations of the level of service provided by the existing bridge or the opportunities and possibilities available with a new bridge. Decisions about the high-level bridge will have lasting implications for our city's infrastructure and resources. It's critical to consider not only the immediate costs, but also the long-term costs, sustainability, culture and heritage, as well as the levels of service for all users. With that in mind, as previously mentioned, administration is advancing a monitor and maintain approach for the high-level bridge to keep it in safe operations for the next 10 to 15 years while we pursue the replacement and decommissioning. The rehabilitation will focus only on bridge elements that are safety critical. This proactive approach will keep the bridge in safe operation until its replacement. Next, the low-level bridges. The low-level bridges include two parallel structures, both of which are beyond their intended service life. These bridges each carry significant traffic, a combined 30 to 40,000 vehicles per day. The southbound low-level bridge, which was built in 1949, is now 77 years old. Rehabilitation was completed last year. The bridge will continue to be monitored until its eventual decommissioning and demolition. The northbound low-level bridge, also referred to as B001, was built in 1900 and was the first bridge in Edmonton to cross the North Saskatchewan River. This bridge is on the city's inventory of historic resources. The northbound bridge is scheduled for rehabilitation starting in 2027 to extend the service life until a replacement bridge is constructed and in service. Once the new multimodal bridge is in place, the northbound structure is targeted to be repurposed for active mode uses. The rehabilitation strategy for the low-level bridges includes the design and construction of a new multimodal bridge adjacent to the existing bridges. Planning's in the early stages at this point. Once the new bridge is complete, all vehicles will move to the new bridge, and the southbound bridge would be demolished. The northbound bridge would then be repurposed for active mode uses. I'll turn the presentation over to Caitlin for the next slide.
Diligent care and maintenance combined with proactive renewal of these bridges has enabled them to serve the needs of Edmontonians for as long as they have. Each of these bridges have exceeded their typical bridge lifespan, which is 75 to 100 years. This is done in part due to the regulatory inspections that have been done by some of the most qualified bridge inspectors, with all repair actioned on time. Scheduled maintenance has also been done with care according to the minimum regulatory requirements. And finally, we have implemented enhanced level 2 inspections and structural health monitoring to proactively stay on top of trending issues or maintenance requirements.
Knowing that the rehabilitation of these bridges was no longer the most appropriate path forward, we pivoted to examining the long-term river crossing requirements and possible options. While we ultimately arrived at the result that you see today, with both bridges being planned for replacement, our review didn't presuppose the necessity of the bridges. Instead, we explored a variety of options, including widening or reconfiguring other bridges, as well as the potential options of choosing not to replace one or both of the crossings. Findings were assessed from several perspectives, including accessibility, connectivity, travel times and delays, growth needs, multimodal transportation requirements, and economic impacts. While some might ask whether we need to replace these bridges at all, they are connections that are vital to the resilience of the transportation network across all modes. Decommissioning of one or both without replacement would lead to a loss of river crossing capacity for active modes, transit, goods movement, and general traffic. The surrounding network cannot sustainably sustainably absorb the displaced traffic as the city grows, resulting in increased delays and congestion. Constraining river crossing capacity would cause traffic to bypass the downtown and central core, leading to significant economic impacts. A reduction in river crossing capacity would also severely impact network resilience, particularly during unexpected incidents or maintenance of other bridges. Ultimately, replacement is required to support the economy, maintain connectivity, manage congestion, and achieve long-term city-building goals. This necessity applies to all modes, including pedestrians, cyclists, transit, commuters, and goods movement. As the existing bridges have significant limitations, replacement bridges also offer opportunities, including better accommodation of transit, expanding active transportation options, and meeting modern standards. The anticipated plan for these bridges is summarized on the table on this slide. The major construction activities are shown in the blue hexagons, and the ongoing monitoring and maintenance activities are shown in dashed green lines. Planning and design activities in advance of construction will take time. This includes not only the design process itself, but other supporting activities such as environmental studies, Indigenous engagement, coordination with partners, cost estimating, and ultimately the assembly of funding. As you see, this is a long-term plan. The activities for each of the bridges will happen over the next several budget cycles. There will be several council decision points along the way. This spring, during the upcoming capital budget adjustment, Council will see the funding request for the rehabilitation of the northbound low-level bridge, which is scheduled for construction in 2027. This rehabilitation is necessary to buy us the time needed to plan, design, and build the new low-level bridge. This work will also set us up in the right way for repurposing the bridge for active transportation uses after the new bridge is in place. As part of the next 4-year capital budget, Council will be presented with funding requests for two critical things. First is the funding for the ongoing maintenance and monitoring of the high-level bridge. This funding will allow us to do the necessary work to ensure high-level bridge can safely serve users for the next decade or more. Second is the funding for design and construction of the new low-level bridge. Beyond the near term, future councils will be presented with decision points such as funding for the planning and design of the high-level bridge replacement, decisions related to the heritage designation of the high-level bridge, and I'll speak a little bit more to that shortly, and finally, the eventual funding for the construction of the high-level bridge and decommissioning of the existing bridge. Estimates for the renewal and replacement of these bridges over the next decade are approximately $1.3 billion, and we will be looking to other orders of government to support. The existing low-level and high-level bridges will be rehabilitated, maintained, and monitored to extend their service life for traffic until new multimodal bridges are in service. Rehabilitation and new bridge construction will be planned to avoid any overlap between these bridges. Concurrent activities will only occur where traffic impacts can be avoided. Traffic will be able to continue to utilize the existing bridges during construction of the new bridges. Repurposing or demolition of the low-level bridge and demolition of the high-level bridge will not occur until their replacements are in service. These will be the main projects in the central area, and scheduling will be carefully managed, with other projects being scheduled around these key projects. Further details regarding the traffic impacts and construction requirements will be refined over the coming years as planning and design progress. We also want to recognize and can't underestimate the heritage nature of these bridges. These bridges are notable and well-loved by many for their presence, their history, and their place in the river valley. The high-level bridge is legally protected as a municipal historic resource. To proceed with decommissioning, City Council must repeal the designation bylaw, which could pose reputational risks. The northbound low-level bridge is listed on the inventory of historic resources. It merits conservation, but it is not legally protected. While we have not found a financially responsible solution for the high-level bridge to preserve it long-term, there is potential for the northbound low-level bridge to be preserved and repurposed for active mode uses. This is the path that we've laid out in the report.
Edmonton is not the only place in Canada needing to address the end of life of historical landmarks. A very similar example is that of the Alexandra Bridge. The Alexandra Bridge has been an iconic feature of the Ottawa-Gatineau skyline for over 120 years. Originally built for trains, horse and wagons, electric streetcars, and pedestrians, the bridge is now used by thousands of pedestrians, cyclists, and motorists. It was determined in 2018 that the bridge has reached the end of its service life. The Government of Canada directed that the bridge be replaced to make sure the crossing can service transportation needs well into the future. Similar to Edmonton's strategy, ongoing repairs will allow it to remain in use until the start of construction in 2028. The project is further ahead in the planning and design process, having completed extensive engagement in the public, with the public, Indigenous communities, GBA Plus focus groups, and other interested parties to determine the preferred design concept. The project is entering the procurement, final design, and construction phase, with completion anticipated by 2032. The new bridge will be designed in a way that avoids corrosion-prone details for longer durability. This will help maintain the bridge in good condition for a longer period and allow it to serve many generations. The new bridge will provide long-lasting benefits to the communities on both sides of the Ottawa River. The entire region will benefit from a safer, more reliable, and more sustainable interprovincial bridge. It is slated to include improved vehicular traffic, provide dedicated pedestrian and cyclist spaces, commemorate the heritage of the existing Alexandra Bridge, provide a safe and accessible route for drivers, pedestrians, and cyclists, as well as sightseers, and provide generous space with well-defined and separated lanes for vehicles and active transportation. And so through our work, we will be looking at the example of the Alexandra Bridge for guidance. And finally, planning, design, and construction for the central area bridges will be ongoing for many years and will require future council decisions through multiple capital budget cycles. In the short term, administration is focused on maintaining safe, reliable operations through targeted rehabilitation, maintenance, and ongoing monitoring of these structures. Administration will work on advancing the following actions. A new standalone capital profile for the northbound low-level bridge rehabilitation will be included in the spring 2026 supplementary capital budget for council approval. Due to the scope and scale of these bridge replacement projects and their forecasted costs over the next several budget cycles, support from other orders of government will be required. Planning is underway to advocate to the federal and provincial governments for support in these major infrastructure initiatives. Further funding strategies for the work outlined in this report will be brought forward as part of the 27-30 capital budget, including the revised approach to the current debt-funded profile for the high-level bridge rehabilitation. The city recognizes these bridges are more than transportation infrastructure. They are historical landmarks and an important part of Edmonton's identity and history. We recognize this information may be difficult for many Edmontonians to hear. At the same time, the city has a responsibility and an opportunity to plan proactively and responsibly to ensure Edmontonians continue to have safe, reliable, and resilient river crossings for generations to come. Thank you. We'll now let the speakers come forward.
Thank you for your presentation. And now we will go to the speakers on this item. And I see that 3 are remote, so I'll start with the remote and then we'll call you up for the in-person one. So Kyle Scholl, are you with us?
Good morning.
Good morning. You're very faint. Can you say good morning again?
What if I yell? Is that any better?
That is better, yes. Just a little bit closer to the mic, if possible.
Okay.
Okay, please go ahead with your 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, Infrastructure Committee, Chair Rutherford, Vice Chair Salvador, members, councillors, Reed Clark, Michael Jans, and Aaron Paquette. This morning, I'm speaking as an individual. Thank you to administration for preparing the report and this information. Nevertheless, here I am, and I'm speaking in opposition to something, which I think is something the record will show isn't my style. I'm here in a state of shock. Decommissioning is such a gentler word than demolition, isn't it? What's proposed is not simply infrastructure replacement. It's the potential loss of 2 rare, physical, tangible, defining elements of Edmonton's identity, the high and low-level bridges. In particular, the high-level bridge is not just another river crossing. It is, in fact, a designated municipal historic resource. It has stood since 1913. It is one of the very few bridges that was built to carry 4 distinct modes: rail, streetcar, vehicles, and pedestrians. It is the bridge that helped physically and symbolically unite Edmonton and Strathcona into a single city in 1912. And today, every summer, it still carries the beloved streetcars, a thriving, immersive, moving piece of history, something that connects generations of Edmontonians to their past and to the River Valley. This is not just infrastructure. This is memory made visible. It is identity. And yet, we are being told now a serious, most likely recommended probable outcome. And that should stop all of us in our tracks, pun intended. A municipal historic resource designation is not simply supposed to be symbolic. It is supposed to mean something. It is supposed to be a signal of commitment, not just to commemorate history, but to conserve it and preserve it. If we do not behave strongly now, then why do we have a Heritage Resources Act? In fact, we are owed better, far better, unless council takes the extraordinary step of repealing the 1995 high-level bridge designation, which would be something that has only happened a small handful of times since the 1980s. Perhaps we shouldn't be doing so. So we need to be very clear about what is being proposed, not just replacing a pair of bridges, but undoing decades of policy. And we must confront the difficult question: how did we get here? The city took ownership of this infrastructure decades ago. The high-level bridge has required life cycle management all along, and yet we now hear that the condition is worse than previously understood. This may be true, but the age of the bridge is not new information. Its life cycle limits were not unknown. The need for ongoing significant rehabilitation was entirely foreseeable, and this means that this is not just an engineering issue, it's a governance issue. Every mayor and councillor since the mid-1990s shares responsibility for the sufficient long-term stewardship or lack thereof of one of our most important pieces of identity. And this is why the moment matters as much as it does. Cities around the world and across Canada have faced this same challenge and chosen to act strongly. They've adapted historic bridges rather than erased them. Many have created pedestrian promenades, linear parks, cycling corridors, and cultural spaces that preserve heritage while serving modern needs. We already see hints of that thinking here. The city has indeed acknowledged the possibility of repurposing the northbound low-level bridge for active transportation, and we've heard vocal and indeed visceral community interest in considering a linear park on the high-level bridge as well. These are not fringe ideas. These are globally proven solutions. See the New York City High Line, the Paris Promenade Plantée, and Seoul Changi-Chon. And in a river valley as extraordinary as Edmonton's, easily our greatest natural asset, a designated Canadian heritage river, the idea of transforming existing structures into public spaces should not be an afterthought. It should be a central objective. Because once these bridges are gone, they're gone forever. We cannot replicate or rebuild authenticity. We cannot recreate history. Edmonton deserves to retain and have nice things. We have too few as it is, and arguably none more visible than these. This is not what responsible asset management or success looks like, sounds like, feels like. I urge this city, I urge this council, this administration to pause, reflect, and choose differently, to recognize that this is not simply a capital planning decision. When I first met with Councillor Clark several months ago, we discussed briefly a place brand strategy for the city. If not here, then when? If not us, then who? If not where? I'm getting lost here and I'm out of time, but I would welcome any questions at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good moderating of your time. Appreciate it. And I'm sure there will be questions of all the panelists today. Okay, I will now, Ryan Jacques. Are you?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. We can hear you clearly. Please go ahead with your 5 minutes.
Sounds good. Thank you, Chair Rutherford, and hello, Infrastructure Committee, Council, and all other folks in attendance today. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and councillors, I've also emailed my presentation to you for your reference. My name is Ryan Jakes, and I'm speaking on behalf of a group called Paths for People, a nonprofit organization that works to make Edmonton a friendlier place to walk, roll, and cycle. Next slide, please. As you may know, the high-level bridge seamlessly integrates with our active transportation network, connecting Edmonton's most dense and tax-efficient neighborhoods with jobs, universities, shopping, entertainment, and much more. Here's some data from Edmonton's open data portal. In the last month, combining east and west pathways, there have been 33,000 cyclists and 41,000 pedestrians counted on the high-level bridge, nearly 75,000 Edmontonians total. Since the start of count data on August 1st, 2018, a whopping 2.2 million cyclist and 3.6 million pedestrian counts. The economic impact of all these Edmontonians using space-efficient active modes on the high-level bridge is immense, from people commuting for work, to supporting local businesses, to lowering our property taxes by reducing vehicle trips that cause traffic on our roads and wear down our road infrastructure, such as growing potholes. Next slide, please. The location of the high-level bridge is very convenient, but there's an even more important aspect of its design, elevation. We have a truly phenomenal river valley, but unlike for vehicles in transit, hills can be a significant barrier and a deterrent to those who walk, roll, and cycle. According to the city website, the base of the rail deck is 156 feet, or about 15 stories above the river. The high-level bridge is a beacon of year-round accessibility, and we urge you to prioritize maintaining active mode access as much as possible during any rehabilitation, as well as a final built form that separates active modes from vehicles, minimizes pedestrian cyclist conflicts, and minimizes elevation change for active modes. Perhaps this is a chance for another look at the award-winning high-level line community proposal. We have some understanding from city administration that the weight of the bridge itself is the primary issue rather than the active load of vehicles on the bridge. However, a dream scenario, if it requires less rehabilitation, of course, would be to build a new bridge for vehicles, transit, and maybe even a provincial train with provincial dollars, while maintaining the high-level bridge for active modes and streetcar only, and preserve its status as a municipal historic resource. For example, if active modes were to utilize the existing vehicle lanes or even the upper deck, would partially or fully dismantling the east and west pathways lighten the load? Next slide, please. We are also intrigued by the creative proposal to repurpose the northbound low-level bridge for active modes. Along with the high-level bridge, these two bridges frame our city's core, and they are arguably the two most historic bridges in the city. It would be a real shame to see them both be demolished. River Valley accessibility is greatly improved with the funicular nearby, and this would be a great addition to our active transportation network. Next slide, please. With our city's significant budget constraints, this bridge work presents a unique, possibly once-in-a-generation opportunity to be paired with work to undo the destructive legacy of the city's 1960s Metropolitan Edmonton Transportation Study, or METS. This is the ultimate downtown freeway loop plan from 1969, along with 5 offshoot freeways, including running through McKinnon Ravine and Mill Creek Ravine. Thankfully, our ravines were saved. Only stage 1, subphase 1 of METS was built to specification, but it still had a massive impact. Next slide, please. Here's the area in 1965 with road access efficiently maintained in all directions and Mill Creek meandering to the North Saskatchewan River before stage 1, subphase 1 of METS. Next slide, please. And here is the area in 1978 after dozens of homes were demolished to build the interchange and the James McDonald Bridge, named after a city engineer who was a key author and proponent of METS, an overbuilt, isolated section of urban freeway that to this day continues to bury Mill Creek into a concrete outflow 10 meters above the river and continues to be unfriendly to walking, rolling, and cycling. Next slide, please. It seems natural to reconfigure the interchange while repurposing the north low-level bridge for active modes, and we should seize this opportunity. The city has already done some conceptual design work in report CR 4529, for example, the trail connectivity focus option that daylights Mill Creek and emphasizes travel efficiency for active modes. This is a great opportunity for you, councillors and city administrators, to undo a harmful legacy and leave your own legacy in the heart of our city. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And now I will go to Nathan Binema. Are you online?
Yes, I am.
Perfect. Please go. Are you ready to go? Please go ahead with your 5 minutes whenever you're ready.
Yes, okay. Well, good morning, councillors, Infrastructure Committee, and anyone else in attendance, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm not super well prepared with a presentation as I've only learned about this meeting yesterday, but I'm intrigued by the fact that 2 of the bridges that I've grown up with are slated for replacement in near future budget cycles. And yeah, I was particularly intrigued by the line from the report that said, quote, that the replacement of the low-level bridges and high-level bridge will provide a rare opportunity to simplify road connections in the River Valley and potentially reclaim valuable River Valley space. I would agree with that and hope that the opportunity wouldn't be missed to, yeah, as the previous speaker alluded to, replace the kind of infrastructure around the James McDonald Bridge with something more human scale and provide the opportunity to daylight Mill Creek. Right now, White Mud Ravine is the only ravine in Edmonton with a creek that is open to the river and where fish are able to spawn. And I think we have 7 species that do spawn there. And so how wonderful would it be to take a step towards restoring Mill Creek as another instance of fish habitat. I've lived in Edmonton for my whole life. I moved to the Strathcona neighborhood 7 years ago. So I'm only speaking on behalf of myself today, but I can say that the prospect of daylighting Mill Creek is something that has come up frequently in my conversations with community members over the past 7 years. And yeah, I think that's what I wanted to say about that. And just a brief comment on the high level bridge is, I don't know all of the ins and outs of that, but it wasn't clear to me from the report that that the possibility of maintaining the bridge, closing it to cars and having it only for active modes had been considered, as I think we're familiar with the fact that vehicle traffic wears things down quite a lot faster than cycling traffic. And with that, I'll yield the remainder of my time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nathan. And now we will bring up David Ridley, who's here in person, and just come over to the side with the Edmonton Heritage Council.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Oh, I'll be standing. Pardon me, here, I'll get set up. That's all fine.
We can hear you perfectly, David, and
We're good there?
perfect.
Oh, there we go. Thank you.
Okay, please go ahead with your 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Good to be here. I feel like something's come between us here, but understood. Yeah, thank you very much, and thanks to administration for this report. The speakers prior have spoken passionately and eloquently about some of the issues at play, so I can skip over a little bit over some of the things I've said. I mean, it is obvious the high-level bridge, and these bridges are iconic and in an industrial love sort of way, beloved by Edmontonians. And of course, the high-level bridge spanning the River Valley and the Alberta legislature is kind of a set of these things. You know, it is an essential piece of infrastructure, and given the prospects, and this has been touched on, the prospects of other infrastructure developments in the future, as well as the potential replacement of this, you know, it's really difficult to say when you're making, as City Council, what are both 25-year, but then potentially 50, 75, and 100-year decisions, what traffic circulation looks like at this place in this city as a priority now or in the future. But the designation of a historic resource and the commitment to this is important, as Mr. Scully eloquently pointed out. The report, of course, touches on this, and perhaps administration has done more work on this than was evidenced in the report. But you know, historic resource evaluation, which is not the only thing at play in this, really involves a full environmental accounting, given the costs of demolition and new construction. There's the economic value, I think we all touch on that. There's the basic infrastructure, benefit to Edmontonians who are walking, cycling, commuting, and of course, the Radial Railway Society that runs the streetcar over top. And then of course, the carrying of goods, the adjacent economic benefits to business, neighborhoods. And these of course all connect to the consequences of the loss of these bridges or the replacement of them, given construction and that. So environmental, economic, and then the social and cultural value, the citizen and visitor relationship to the bridge, the experiences related to it. I'd be remiss, you know, this is designated as a historic, municipal historic resource. There is a more difficult side to the high-level bridge. I think we know that. For perhaps it's a minority view, but in terms of Indigenous community, these bridges also have an element of, you know, a transformation in the landscape, which was difficult, historically difficult. And of course, Edmontonians with mental health challenges have also, and their families, of course, are aware of this. So where I'm going with this is there are models for assessing this. And I think with the Heritage Places strategy that is coming out, it may be an opportunity for us, including my organization, the Edmonton Heritage Council, and others in administration, to maybe dig deeper into the models we use for how we make these decisions so that those three, environmental, economic, and the socio-cultural elements are well considered. I think the models are emerging. I don't think they're necessarily mature. I'm not an expert on them, but I think it's an opportunity that might be looked at and used in this. I will say one other thing about this. In the province of Alberta, the Historical Resources Act, I'm afraid to say, is, I would say, uniquely not that helpful in supporting what municipalities do in this area. Although in 1971, when the Historical Resources Act was brought into legislation, it was regarded as a very advanced piece of legislation, not just in Alberta, but across the country. But in Alberta, the other elements that would help citizens and government, municipal governments in Alberta have not really developed as it pertains to, we'll say, broadly built heritage or other forms of heritage. In archaeology, it has, because that's about the oil industry, and of course, regulation there is much stricter. So, I'm raising this simply because I think, broadly speaking, and not immediate to this, is an issue that's broader in terms of legislation. And Mr. Jacques spoke, I don't know that he referred to it specifically, but about concepts such as the high-level line and thinking about the linear park concept that was brought forward not so many years ago. It won an award design for its thinking. The possibilities there. So with that, I'll leave it. I just really want to highlight that matter of how we model and think into these decisions, that they're fully considered, and there's a fuller accounting of how we make these decisions, how you will make these decisions, and how we make them as Edmontonians. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we will go to questions of our public speakers. So Councillor Jans, please go first.
Thank you. I guess maybe I'll start with Guest Ridley. Thank you for coming. Certainly share some of the concerns and such. When you think about preservation of the high-level bridge, what are you kind of picturing here? Is it a are you thinking about vehicular access, pedestrianizing, the high-level line? How could you elaborate a bit more on what your expectations are?
I don't have sort of well-defined expectations. I would see that more as maybe the current modalities, but perhaps without vehicles on it. I know the high-level line approach also, I think, continued to, it was really about the upper deck in its development. So that has to be thought through. I mean, I do wonder if you don't have vehicular traffic, what that means in terms of the lifespan of this. The low-level bridge, of course, is an older bridge, but if it's the demands on it in terms of heavy vehicles are reduced, then perhaps that changes the case here a little bit in that regard. These are unique structures. No one in Paris is talking about changing or the Eiffel Tower, given its structure. That's 137 years old. But neither do Parisians, race up and down it to get to work each day. So there's those elements. So I'm not a materials engineer, but I could envision something that would be wonderful and in the river valley that could happen here.
Appreciate the feedback. If I can go to Guest Jakes, if I recall, a year and a half ago, your group had been existentially questioning the need for the 76th Avenue Bridge in Mill Creek. Have you applied a similar thought to whether or not we need a vehicular north-south bridge at all?
Haven't considered it too much at the moment. Also, again, recognizing that I regret some of my actions last year and want to approach it in a more positive manner. But the river crossings, there are less of them, so the default stance would be, at the very least, having a bi-directional Walterdale Bridge. I know it's possible to widen that to 4 lanes, but maintaining that connectivity not only for vehicle access but for buses as well.
I would say I have received some correspondence from folks asking, what if we were to take the suggested funds for the high-level bridge and invest them into public transportation alternatives instead, bus, rapid transit, those other matters? Would we be able to move more people more effectively per dollar than a car bridge? And I realize it's very early on in the process, so I'll be asking administration about that as well, but I'm curious to hear more if your group had or anyone else had started doing some of that sort of third-party analysis.
Not at the moment, but it's something we can look into for sure, because it would be very expensive, of course, to build a new high-level bridge or to extensively rehabilitate, for example, the $1 billion over 75 years that has been given by state administration. So there's definitely some trade-offs here, and maybe the money can be put to better use in other ways.
And so just to be clear, your advocacy position today is that you want us to focus on maintaining the high-level bridge for active transportation. I think I heard buses. And you want us to also focus on River Valley connectivity for the low-level bridge. That's the crux of your ask today.
Yeah, essentially we're urging the high-level bridge to stay open to active modes during rehabilitation as much as possible, as well as a really quality final built form that minimizes elevation change for active modes, as well as better active mode usage in the interchange and low-level bridge area as well as River Valley benefits.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jans. Councillor Salvador?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks to all the speakers for joining us today. I just wanted to come back to, I'll start with Speaker Ridley. So the idea of really taking sort of that comprehensive approach when decisions like this are being considered and made. And you mentioned the Heritage Places strategy as an opportunity to dig into that, to make sure that we're incorporating the social, economic, environmental and cultural elements. I guess I'm just looking for a little bit more information there. What are you envisioning that process looking like? And where are we at in that process?
So right now, I don't think anything specific about this is in the emerging draft of the Heritage Places strategy. I mean, it would be there implicitly. In raising this, perhaps my question is more to administration as to what's the model we're currently using. And this is not limited to the Bridges Group or within integrated infrastructure. It would also be, throughout other city departments such as urban planning and economy. I think we're starting to get our heads around this in terms of built heritage, but we have a unique situation here, something that's essential infrastructure. So again, I'm not the expert on the models. I know they're there. It would require more research on my part and within our organizations to see how these work.
Okay, well that's helpful, and I can ask some of those questions to administration as well. And coming back to Speaker Jakes, you had mentioned beyond looking at things like the high-level line or opportunities for retaining active modes, the reconfiguration of the roadway network with the low level. You mentioned that some work had been done on that, and I apologize if I missed that, but was that city-led work?
Yes, that was city-led work. I don't know what year it was from, but the report number, at least in the bottom corner, was CR 4529. Perhaps city administration can direct you to where that is.
Okay, yeah, I will look into that as well and ask some questions about that. Because if I'm understanding what you were putting forward is, if we're in there and we're going to be doing work anyways, isn't it an opportunity to sort of leverage that into better design of the network in that area? Is that what you're suggesting? You mentioned things like daylighting Mill Creek, improving connectivity in that area.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. It's a great opportunity to repurpose it for active modes and reconfigure the interchange to better support these active modes and the River Valley. We already missed one opportunity to do this with the Valley Line LRT construction, and this may be the last generational, once-in-a-lifetime kind of opportunity to pair it with other work going on in the area.
Okay, great. I will follow up on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Salvador. Councillor Clark?
Great, thank you, Chair. I'll start with David, Speaker 4. A question for you and your organization. I guess I kind of struggle with, you know, when we make these designations, we don't really have any, we kind of make them, we pass them, and it's great, and there gives some, you know, kind of certainty, I think, to the public. But there's no funding behind that I know of. Is that something that you think that we should take into consideration?
I would think so. I mean, clearly for other Edmontonians who own properties, of course, there's the Heritage Resource Management Program. But is that, am I addressing your question? It's just like what?
Yeah.
What other resources might, if at the, are you saying, sorry for the clarification, at the time of designation, should there be a consideration of what resources are available in order to?
Yeah.
Because my understanding, I would think, to some degree, or perhaps to a high degree, the city inherited an infrastructure deficit when this bridge, however that came over from the CPR. I don't know the whole arrangement in that, but you know, that's an aspect of this. And then, of course, going forward. So, you know, those are things those are costs borne by the city and the citizens.
Yeah, I mean, especially for, you know, something as important as this. Okay. I'll go to speaker 2, to Ryan. I was just trying to get your numbers that you had for active modes. If you could share those again with me, that'd be great. Or just kind of a high level.
So in the last month, I did from April 24th to May 23rd, because I was doing this yesterday. There were 33,000 cyclists counted and 41,000 pedestrians counted. It works out to about 300,000 cyclists every year and 400,000 pedestrians every year. So 2.2 million cyclists since August 1st, 2018 is the total count, and 3.6 million pedestrians.
Okay.
And that includes the east and west pathways. The west pathway is a lot more popular with cyclists and pedestrians because it was widened in a past rehabilitation, and it just more seamlessly connects with the active transportation network.
Great, thank you. And assuming you've got some data on some kind of other high use paths, how does this compare?
The high level bridge west path is the #1 path in the city. I think I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but they are easily accessible within the portal. In my presentation, I filtered by the location description, but if I were to leave that off, you could see all of the different paths in the city.
That's okay. The #1 path to see, that's the information I need. Thank you.
Yep.
I'll go to speaker 1, Kyle. If I'm just kind of summarizing your presentation and really good thoughts that you shared with us, the plans for the low-level bridge recommendation, you know, is maybe less priority in your mind, kind of can live with that. But the high level, if I'm summarizing correctly, in your opinion, you know, that needs to stay in whatever kind of form that looks like in the future. Is that correct?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. And just to answer briefly, I think it's significant to acknowledge that though on the inventory of historic resources, the low level not actually being designated is genuinely a slightly different situation. Certainly, I'm sympathetic to the fact of it being the first bridge across the North Saskatchewan in the Edmonton area, but it's correct to point out that there is a difference there.
Great, thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you. I'll go next. I really appreciate all the speakers being here today and the diversity of perspectives on what I've heard from many Edmontonians about these beloved bridges. I guess I just want to go to Mr. Ridley because I'm still struggling with understanding the position of the Heritage Council on this matter. Like I understand sort of in your presentation, you talked about looking at different dimensions of value, right? So like social, cultural. I guess at the end of the day, you know, we're in a really tough position as council. Like when I look at the report, the rehabilitation of the high level would be 380 million with a -30 to +50% accuracy. So it could swing pretty wild between those, but even at 380 million. And what I heard in the presentation from administration is that even keeping it pedestrian was explored, but there would still be, even if that's half the dollar amount, let's say 200 million, to keep that pedestrian, then you still have to spend money to build the new bridge. at what point, and then they said the rehabilitation just to operate the high level, whether pedestrian or vehicular, for the next 70 years totals an investment of $1 billion. And we don't get any enhancements to our network, whether it's active mode, transit, or vehicle network improvements. How do we what would you suggest with those numbers kind of barreling down at us, and that's the reality of what we're facing? How do we weigh those things? Because at the end of the day, money is finite, especially at the municipal level. Thoughts?
Those are difficult, but that's the point I'm making is I'm not clear on whether the model what's being presented to us here in this report fully elaborates. There's no doubt it's a difficult situation. I wouldn't expect any further analysis to change that, but it is a matter of a full accounting. If I just touch on Councillor Clark's question, was an interesting one. It may be heresy within heritage circles to raise this, but we do have to think about if you are designating essential infrastructure that has a noted lifespan, and we're not talking about bricks and mortar, which in terms of where they're situated, what their use is a different case. I think it was wonderful to designate the high-level bridge, but I'm not sure at that time what the considerations were about, what does this look like going ahead in terms of cost? That always needs to be a consideration. As long as I think we're doing the full accounting, we recognize what the social, cultural, and economic benefits are of heritage preservation.
Well, hey, this has like opened up a whole paradigm can of worms for me, because I think about all of the bylaws for historical designation, even including the last council meeting, that I don't think we discussed at any point commensurate funding with those heritage designations. So it's opened up a whole paradigm for me on that on that facet beyond the high level. So thank you, and not thank you at the same time.
I don't think I can leave the room now.
Kyle, I wanna go to you for a minute, because I think you brought up a really great point around the how did we get here conversation. And I guess we could belabor it, and I think all of us could, but what do you think the best path forward is? Right? Well, however we got here, we're here today. It's our reality in this moment. What is the best path forward in your opinion?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. It's a big one, and I'll try to answer it succinctly. I think acknowledging some of the really excellent commentary from Speaker Ridley, acknowledging that these are not easy discussions, these are not easy decisions, that council and committee have a number of elements that weigh on you in these decisions. I think what I've been hearing from others and what I feel resonates with me is it would be reassuring to know that there is that lens that's applied in these cases where I think we all acknowledge this is not just any bridge, this is not just any pipe, this is more than that. And so on a go forward, I myself, and I can only speak for myself, I know Edmontonians are tired and costs of living are high, but I would pay more to retain a piece of cultural identity. I'll leave it there.
No, that's appreciated, and thanks for again staying within the time. You even monitored my time. I appreciate it. Okay, with that, are there any other questions for any panelists from either members of committee or council? Okay, I'm not seeing any. We will, first of all, thank you so much again for all the speakers for being here and sharing your passion for these amazing pieces of infrastructure in our city. And we will go to Councillor Jans, who selected this item for debate, to kick us off with questions to administration.
Thank you so much. I appreciate this, and I appreciate getting this conversation going about this critical infrastructure. I guess I wanted to start really big picture at city plan. We have a goal of 50% of trips not by car when we reach 2 million people. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
So how does through that lens this conversation about the bridges take? It seems like it's a like for like, and if we keep doing like for like, how is that going to move us in the mode shift direction?
Councillor Jans, I think it's important that we reinforce that we're not looking at like for like. We're looking at replacing the bridges in their current configuration because they are.
Sorry, point of privilege. Can we get the audio up a bit? Is that possible? Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing the speaker.
Okay. I can speak closer.
Wonderful,
okay.
thank you.
So I think what I was saying is it's really important that we be clear that we're not considering them like for like, but we are considering their replacement in their current location because the connection to the existing networks, mass transit, pedestrian, cyclists, and vehicular are really important. We are talking about multimodal bridges, and I think that's really important that it not be seen as we are going ahead to do a vehicular bridge. We're going ahead to do multimodal bridges, and it's really important that they be seen as reflecting not only the needs of today, but also of that 2 million. And so when we talk about the number of lanes dedicated to vehicular traffic, for example, we have not established that, but we know that we need to include consideration for not only single cars, but goods movement, for example. These are really important to our economic network, and so there's a lot of consideration that need to be put in to ensure that everybody can move around easily across the city.
So how would goods movement work? Because I'm worried that 99% of the traffic is single occupancy vehicles blocking that goods movement.
Well, and it's not to say that there isn't that challenge, but for example, at this point, there's no goods movement going on high-level bridge, right? The height restriction, there's weight restrictions on the low-level bridges, and so all of those things are things that we can consider and improve to challenge this idea that we're going for like. We want to improve on every mode, and Natalie wants to jump in.
Thanks, Pascal. The other thing beyond the goods movement component is we are looking very carefully at the transit accommodation on these bridges. Right now, there are limitations on both the low-level and high-level bridges for transit, so we would be making sure that these new bridges meet those modern standards for accommodation of transit. We are currently doing the mass transit planning work, and one of these bridges may be the location for future mass transit. There may be queue jumps or dedicated lanes across the river on these new bridges. And then active modes is a big piece of this. So not only for pedestrians, but also for cyclists. The high-level bridge would be, the future bridge would be enhanced for that type of accommodation. The low-level bridge, the new multimodal bridge, would accommodate that type of use, and we would be repurposing the northbound bridge dedicated for active transportation uses.
So I'm interested in preserving the high-level bridge for active and also bus rapid transit and just priority only buses down the high-level bridge. Have we looked at that or what the costing would be?
Yes, yes, we have, Councillor Jans, and I think one of our speakers actually kind of spoke to it. The concern with the high-level bridge is not the weight of the vehicles, it's the weight of the bridge itself. And so for any type of use, and Councillor Rutherford correctly assumed it, any type of use, the rehabilitation would be as expensive as it is for what would be maintaining it for vehicular traffic. And so buses only or anything like that. And so the reality of the recommendation that administration brought forward was trying to manage how we could be efficient with the dollars that are at hand, knowing that 2 bridges will definitely be more expensive than 1. Maintaining the high-level bridge for, even if we wanted active modes only, would be the same cost as maintaining it for all traffic.
I'm sorry if I missed that. Is that in the report somewhere? Or is that a subsequent report?
It was presented in the private report that was provided to council in 2025.
Could that be made public now that this is all in a public dialogue? Because I think it would be.
I believe that could be done. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much.
So just to confirm, you'll work on a motion for that then?
I don't believe it needs to. I believe it was private because it was awaiting this meeting.
Because we moved as council to keep it in private, we would have to give counter direction to release it publicly, is my understanding.
Yeah, anything that
Yeah.
council decides to keep in private is your purview
Yeah,
to
so you
release.
will have to do you would have to do a motion.
To unseal what was sealed. Got it. Okay, I'll work with the clerk then. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Salvador.
Yeah, thank you. Just to follow up on those questions, I had similar ones around just the retention of active modes on the existing structure. And one of our speakers brought up, have we looked at things like lightening load a little bit by changing the orientation of where those active modes would go, and redirecting active modes to the road itself as opposed to the two shared use paths on either side. Like, I guess how far down that line have we explored those opportunities?
We looked at a number of different opportunities such as that. We didn't look to the nth level of detail because the bridge itself requires a significant amount of work. It's not just the deck or the superstructure of the bridge, it's actually the foundations of the bridge that require a fair bit of work. There is scour in the river valley as well that needs to be addressed. So it's a massive structure with a lot of work that's required. Starting to fiddle around and move components of the bridge and move users into the center of the bridge is going to be quite an expensive prospect, and I don't expect it to be significantly less than what we were projecting at the time. So we're looking at hundreds of millions of dollars.
And through that work, I guess just coming back to, I think a number of the speakers mentioned the high-level line proposal, that was also included as part of that exploration. And I know that was a few years ago when that was initially brought forward, but was that also looked at as part of your consideration?
So yeah, so we when the high-level line proposal came forward, we looked at if we could include it in the rehabilitation project that was started in 2022. And so we worked with the group at the time and had confirmed that the cost of using the upper deck would go above and beyond what was possible at the time. Now, the idea of exploring something similar to a high-level line within the new design is something that we would do moving forward. We have not done at this point yet.
Sorry, say that last part again?
Well, if we wanted to explore a high-level line type connection through a new bridge on the corridor, we would do that through the design phase.
Okay, so yeah, if we wanted to pursue that type of linear park, the idea would be to incorporate that into a new structure, not be able to adapt the existing.
That's right.
And if I can just comment, I think what is exciting about a new bridge is that we get to look at what those needs are in terms of, connection across the river, in terms of vehicles, in terms of transit, in terms of active transportation, in terms of what the public wants that bridge to be used for. Then we're going to end up having a series of conversations about what we can afford as a city. And so I think that we are really at the beginning of this project, and being able to work through what those decisions are over the next decade, I think is the opportunity in this project.
Okay, and just wanted to come back to some of the comments from Speaker Ridley, and I think really good questions around the model of decision making, or the model used for decision making, and how we're making sure that we're accounting for all aspects of that: environmental, social, economic, cultural value as well. Can you just walk me through what that framework looks like currently?
All of those components and many more were part of the work that we've done for both the low-level and the high-level bridges. We've looked at the modes of travel that are accommodated on the existing bridges and how well they're serving all of those different modes and providing level of service to those users. We've looked at the environmental requirements associated with the rehabilitation work, as well as at a initial level related to the planning and design of the replacements. Obviously, there's a lot more work to do as we embark on the planning and design for those projects over the next several years. We've also looked at the financial components, so that's a huge part of the decision-making process. We've looked at the scenarios that would retain the bridges for active mode uses while replacing the bridges, as well as the economics of not replacing the bridges and what the implications of that would be. From a social and heritage perspective, that's been a huge component of the work that's taken place as well. We didn't bring this report forward with this recommendation lightly, knowing that these bridges are very well loved and have heritage aspects to them. These were not easy decisions. I'll just be honest about that. We've looked at them for several years to get to this point.
Thank you. I will just take my turn now. And with that, I just literally forgot my train of thought. When we're thinking about building city, and I really took the speaker's point about, we're not just thinking, and when we're dealing with infrastructure in the short term, we're thinking about, 100 years out, what the modal traffic patterns are going to be. Is this where we would invest this money in our whole road and active mode and transit network?
I recognize that I'm rather new to Edmonton, but this is a city built on a river, and being able to cross that river, and as many of the speakers spoke about, connecting different sides of the city together, I think will be needed now and into the future. I think in the design process, understanding how many lanes, what kind of features are on there, conversations with the province about what they might want with this, all of those things will be important to prioritize as we build into that. And I think that's where the timelines really are allowing us that time to have that conversation, to know what we really need here now and into the future.
Yeah, I'm just really concerned about the timelines and a lot of the assumptions that are baked into this report. When I read this report at a high level, one of the things that becomes apparent to me is this plan is still contingent on funding from other orders of government. Is my understanding correct, first and foremost?
So at this point in time, we identified through the capital investment outlook for 2036 that the debt capacity would be required to be identified by City Council for about 1.3 billion. At this point in time, that is our best guess at the total investment that is required to replace both bridges. And so at this point in time, and it was confirmed in the CIO, that the city has capacity to pay for this.
But
the
decisions that council makes subsequent to this around road widening, as an example, sorry, Joanne, impact that debt? Like, are we...
You're correct. You're correct,
Where
Councillor
are
Redford.
we in terms of, how are we going to make sure that as council subsequently over the next 15 years are making other decisions on other network pieces that if this is really truly that top priority of how do we make sure we can continue to get across the North Saskatchewan River and do it in all modes, which is important. How are we making sure that we're not accidentally, inadvertently making decisions on other network components that will impact our ability to actually execute this plan if other orders of government don't come to the table?
I think, Councillor Rutherford, that's something that both council and administration will have to work together to ensure that there's always clarity around that. It's been included in the CIO to really start that conversation and say the recommendation from administration is to preserve that debt room and to ensure that that is maintained until we have, hopefully, commitments from other levels of government that could reduce the fiscal burden for Edmontonians.
Yeah, I think the challenge, though, is that the CIO or the capital impact outlook is one document that's so meaty that and we are inundated as council with so much information and that's done in February, March, and we're making the budget decisions in November. How are we making sure we're linking those?
Yeah, so Stacey is mentioning that we frequently report on debt and debt servicing, so the CIO, the capital financial updates, the SCBAs, and I think what we can do is make...
But you make the reports on the debt servicing based on what's been approved.
Yes, and we can...
That's the challenge.
We can have the discussion with council about how you would like us to report on that room, that debt room that is required for these projects. and there could be a conversation about how should it be considered and how should it be reported.
Yeah, I think that's tantamount to me, because I think what I'm hearing is a desire from Edmontonians to maybe not necessarily just want a functional bridge, but a bridge that is actually a generational bridge. And that costs some financial. So if we're losing something, what are we gaining in return, and making sure that there's no compromises there? Okay, thank you. Okay, Councillor Knack. Sorry, Mayor Knack.
Whatever, it's all good.
Mayor Knack.
Thank you for the report. So just to close the loop on that question, so we are building this next 4-year budget with a clear amount of funding in mind for this renewal, building that up. That is, I mean, unless council votes to remove that, that is going to be in. That's a non-negotiable.
Council needs to make a decision about how to treat the debt room, but administration will be providing that clarity in November, December, when you have the deliberations on how to do that.
And building that in with that expectation, and you'll show us that and give us a sense of what the financial implications are. So I do want to ask, I think, and just to clarify, because I remember reading through the report, on the section of the northbound low-level bridge, I think I heard in one of the answers, but I just want to clarify, that is the expectation, unless you receive direction otherwise, that would be decommissioned for vehicle use but continue to be retained for active modes of transportation?
That's correct. Our approach that we are taking is to repurpose the northbound bridge for active transportation uses. There are future decision points, however, during the 4-year budget that may allow you the opportunity to change that direction. We will be seeking the funding for the next stages of design for the low-level bridge replacement, and we could receive different direction at that point, but otherwise we are proceeding with the repurposing.
And if I can add, this is actually the fiscally prudent option.
Yes.
Demolition does come at a cost, and so keeping the bridge actually prevents us from having a cost of demolition, and allows us to have the benefit of a historical resource focused on active transportation at that grade level.
That's great I think that's a really great point to highlight, whereas that's not necessarily the case on the high level. The one thing I do want to ask about the high level, and I think this is maybe where the other orders of government comes in, I am concerned about the notion of sort of, like, at this point, it feels like it will need to be a mega bridge. Because it's going to need to have vehicle lanes of traffic, dedicated bus rapid transit, because I don't think we build a north-south connector without dedicated bus rapid transit. That to me this should be a non-negotiable. You're going to build active transportation. If you were to demolish the high-level bridge, streetcar connection, because I still think that is too critical of a piece to our city to not have that. High-speed rail. Because the province wants to connect in from the airport. And so I'm just wondering about, frankly, the practicality of a singular, I'm going to call it a mega bridge, that can actually handle all of that versus the cost of saying, okay, yes, it's a large cost to retain that space, but I just don't know if we've budgeted out what a truly new bridge with all of those methods of transportation would actually cost us.
I think we are in a capital planning, and I know, having worked on numerous projects, there will always be several decisions. We're going to have to start with all of the things that we want this to accomplish, and we're going to have to start pricing and start figuring out, what are we willing to pay for. And so I do think that those decisions will come over time in the planning, and prioritization will be a challenge for the city and for council.
Just to add to that, to what Sarah had just mentioned, one of the reasons why there's a little beauty in this plan, we've got the time to allow a few things to happen over the next several years. So the province has their provincial rail master plan that hasn't yet been publicly released. That will provide us some insights and allow us the time to continue to work with the province on the what and the where of that. It may or may not be the high-level bridge. And similarly, we're working on the mass transit planning planning currently, and that will allow us to inform the future bridge planning as well for the high-level and low-level bridges. So we have a few things that are in play that will inform the future decisions related to these bridges. Absolutely, there are a lot of demands for that crossing. It may not be as many as we initially think.
Okay, yeah, and we'll come back to that high-speed rail because I don't see the initial thought of trying to connect via other modes doesn't seem realistic either, so I don't see how you don't have that connection, but I'll come back in another round. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Knack. Councillor Clark.
Great, thank you. Thanks for the report. I know this is not an easy recommendation report to build out for us, so I appreciate that. Just when I was kind of going through the reports, I don't know if I saw an analysis of like how many lanes do we need in sort of an optimal setting across the river, whether we're talking about cars, active modes, or transit. I guess even further, like, I mean, how many connections do we need coming downtown, right? Because what we're talking about, especially for the high-level bridge, is essentially 2 lanes that go one way.
So, Councillor Clark, we've established that we need the connections where they are to support the road network and ensuring that the modes are well connected through, like Edmonton has as it sits now, and we're growing to 2 million. We have not gone to the level of detail of establishing the number of lanes, for example, or as Natalie was mentioning, we need to do more work with the planning on mass transit to determine what kind of mass transit connection we're talking about across the different bridges. So those are all things that will happen over the next few years when we do the planning and design of the new bridges to ensure that we take the best information that's available at that point in time and take that into account as we plan.
Okay, so it's kind of the connectivity we need right now, but in the future, it could be more, I would assume, right? So we'll look at that as we move forward. Okay. And just hearing correctly, just in terms of other funding from either province or the federal government, we haven't started those conversations yet, as it's still too early to kind of go through that with both the rehab and the construction?
That's correct.
Okay. And I'll ask this question just because I know it's got brought up, and we'll make that report that's private public. But are we saying that even if we leave the bridge as it is right now and nobody crosses it, that it's still going to need a significant amount of work, rehab, just to stay up the way it is? Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. This bridge is old. It requires a lot of work. We wouldn't want to let it just sit there and degrade over time. It would become a bit of a safety hazard for us. So people will use the bridge if the bridge is there, and it does require repairs. Okay.
But would that number be significantly less than kind of what's been presented here, or we don't know? Or you're saying it's the same because the way of the bridge is the way of the bridge?
For active transportation uses, the number is significant. So it may not be the 380 million, but it's going to be up there. Just the loading itself of like a crowd of people is significant enough to require us to have to repair this bridge.
Okay. So whether it's just people or we're going 30,000 vehicles, it doesn't matter?
Yes.
Okay. Just want to make sure we're clear on that.
And just for clarity, that doesn't come from me. That comes from our engineering experts that we've hired that have looked at every bit of this bridge.
Okay. I think I had another question, but I think you answered it with that one. So I am good for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Stevenson?
Thank you very much. Maybe just again, appreciate the report. Appreciate this is a challenging one. I just wanted to better understand some of the numbers I think I heard today. So it's noted in the report that maintaining the high level bridge would be about $1 billion over the next 75 years. The report also referenced the 1.3 billion in the next 10 years. Can you just remind me again what's included in that 1.3 billion so I understand that?
So, Councillor Stevenson, the 1.3 billion is the cost to, let me just confirm everything it includes the cost of the replacement bridges, as well as the rehabilitation that will be required to maintain the bridges in place until the replacements are built, the demolition costs and some of the conversion costs that we've talked about for like the low-level bridge, for example. And so it is a fulsome estimate of the plan that is in front of you to replace the connections.
And I'm going to jump in and just say it's a high-level estimate at this point, and the decisions in design and planning will influence the final cost.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I think I'm struggling with how the 1 billion over 75 years is seen as a more expensive proposition than the 1.3 billion over the next 10 years, which I assume also has costs after that point.
Just to speak to that, so we're talking in excess of $1 billion, almost regardless of which option, we select. So in the case of repurposing the high-level bridge for active mode uses, you would have the costs incurred to do the work for the rehabilitation up front, plus all of the costs of the rehabilitations over the remaining life of it, every 25 years or so. And in that instance, you would also then be building a new bridge, so you would have the costs associated with the new bridge construction as well. And the same type of concept would apply for the low-level bridge. So you're looking at, in that case, 2 bridges.
Yeah, I think I'm understanding that, and I'm understanding that the 1.3 billion is for 2 replacement bridges. But yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just struggling to understand how it's more expensive to maintain the high level if it's going to be 1.3 billion, and again, a portion of that, recognizing that's for 2 bridges in the next 10 years alone for the new bridge.
Councillor Stevenson, so what we tried to illustrate by providing the $1 billion cost to maintain the high-level bridge was the fact that it's not only a decision of now. So if we went with the idea of maintaining it, we would spend 380 million plus minus 30 plus 50% is our cost estimate at this point in time. That would be done now. In 25 years, we would have to spend the equivalent amount, perhaps more. And then as time grows, that rehab amount grows over time, which is why that $1 billion cost estimate around maintaining it for 75 years. The difference with the replacement cost is that you do the upfront capital, but then the maintenance cost over the 75 years are much less. There will still be costs related to maintaining the bridges, and the rehabilitation will be needed every 25 years, but will be in the early time of their life cycle, which means that the rehabilitations will be much less expensive, much less risk, which is what another piece of the puzzle around the high-level bridge is, that we may estimate the rehabilitation costs, but we don't even know if they would be feasible and be able to be done safely.
And can I just jump in and add, it's also very disruptive. And so the current planned rehab was looking at a full closure of 3 years. This new plan looks at maintaining the existing river crossing, the existing active transportation modes, vehicle traffic over the construction period. And so the disruptions to Edmontonians of a significant connection is limited in this one.
Okay, that's helpful context. And I'm sure there's also sort of this consideration of the functionality value that's brought with this plan as well. So it's not strictly cost, but looking at risk, disruption, and functionality, correct?
Yes, 100%.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. Councillor Wright?
Thank you. And if we don't demolish the current bridge, we'll continue to have soil contamination and lead. Like, are we worse off environmentally as well by keeping it there?
So some of the lead paint on the high-level bridge was removed during previous rehabilitation work. There are some locations where lead paint is still remaining. Over time, that paint coat has failed, and so it is a bit of a problem for us. We would be looking at, if we don't if we don't remove the bridge, we would be looking at repainting the structure, which is a significant cost.
Okay.
And that would be like a contained process where any of the debris would be removed and contained safely.
Okay. And then is there any way, and this would probably, I guess, come in the design process as far as like looking at the traffic flow, going back to the olden days when both the Walterdale and High Level were two-way traffic? Would that be considered then?
During the planning study for the replacement bridges, absolutely, we'll be looking at the functional requirements for the bridges, including the number of lanes and the direction of travel. There's the potential that we go to two-way on the high-level bridge. There's certainly a look at two-way for transit along the high-level bridge corridor in the long term. But again, until we get into the planning study in detail, we won't have a lot of those answers just yet. But we will be bringing updates as that process unfolds.
And is there any way to sort of honor the past by replicating the current design?
So the current design of the high-level bridge is very intricate and would be very costly to both build and maintain. But we will look at how we can honor the heritage aspect of the high-level bridge in a more modern version, if I could say.
Okay. But it's not necessarily going to be the signature bridge of the Walterdale. It's not going to...
At this point, we're looking to provide options to council that would be more functional, but there will be many points of decision where council could provide direction to look at something more signature. But a replica is something that we would not recommend because of how difficult it would be to build and to maintain it, and the true cost of it could be billions above what you're seeing right now. It's a very labor-intensive type of construction, and there's very little knowledge left around the world as to how to do that with riveted steel structures.
Oh, okay. And what was else I was going to ask? The report talks about other uses for the river valley. What is it? Additional parks? Is it commercial development?
In terms of the road connections around the low-level bridge, we're looking at simplifying those road connections. Is this what you mean? Yeah. So if that's... Yes. Yes. So in the case of the replacement of the low-level bridge, we are looking to simplify some of the road connections. As the speakers mentioned earlier, they are relics of past freeway plans. They are a little bit confusing, and they do require a significant amount of travel around that area and encroach on a lot of the very valuable river valley land that we have. With the planning study for the replacement of the low-level bridge, we'll be looking to simplify that, remove some of the connections, including some other adjacent bridges as well.
Okay. And, the 1.3 billion, that's today's dollars. And that's, I think it said plus or minus 50 to 100%?
We didn't say a plus or minus because this is a order of magnitude, and it is looking ahead at the timelines as presented in the report. So inflation is in that number, but this is a conceptual number to kind of get a sense of the order of magnitude of this. Because we haven't started any design and haven't set the scope, like the number of lanes or what kind of purpose there is. Those will all inform a future estimate.
Okay, and if we do get other levels of government involved, it's usually a third, a third, a third. So we're...
Right now, there is no program I'm aware of that we can specifically apply to funding. The city of Edmonton over time has been effective at having strong transportation plans and being ready to apply when other levels of government announce funding. And I think that those kind of opportunities will absolutely be pursued.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Tang?
Thank you very much for the presentation and the in-depth responses. I just want to revisit the renewal budget from the previous budget cycle. So just to double check, out of that 200 million, we have already exhausted all of it up until now, or we will be by the end of 2026 on high level. Is that correct?
Apologies, Councillor Tang. We're having trouble hearing you. Could you repeat your
Oh,
question?
no. Okay. I'm using
I
headphones.
heard the question. It was the 200 million that we allocated for the high-level bridge. Has that all been utilized on the high-level bridge?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Rutherford. So the 200 million that was approved for the rehabilitation will be brought back in the 27-30 capital budget discussion to be discussed as to how council wants to use that dollar or that debt funding to support the next steps of the program in front of you. I think we spent just under $5 million at this point in time.
Yeah, we've spent 4.6 million to date.
Okay, thank you for that. And at the time, can you hear me okay right now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, at the time, 200 million was the ideal investment administration recommended based on assessment at that time. And so because bridges are 100% funded at ideal level, but even then, there was some updated assessment that showed that it's worse than expected, that was worse than this 200 million estimate, correct?
Okay, apologies, Councillor Tang. I'll try to answer your question, and if I miss it, please let me know. Okay, so the $200 million was approved in 2022 based on very initial studies of the high-level bridge, understanding what might be required to complete the rehabilitation. The cost estimate, again, was very high level and was based on preliminary numbers, and we thought we would kind of do a rehabilitation to budget. That was the plan at the time in a discussion with council. As we proceeded with the design, we did a lot more testing. Natalie mentioned that our third-party experts were brought in, did some destructive testing, and we got a chance to look at the millions of components of the bridge. It's in worse shape than we anticipated. And so we, at that point, we're in the design phase for that rehabilitation and brought back to council the private report in 2025 to inform that we were way over budget and that we didn't think the course still made sense. And so at that point, we paused the rehabilitation project, came back with the strategy that's in front of you. And so at this point, that is why the $5 million has been spent, was doing that work.
And when you say worse conditions than initially anticipated, so I heard lead, but like riverbank issues, you know, can you just highlight a few of why it's worse?
There's a. Yeah, sorry, why is it worse than originally anticipated? So we didn't have the same level of information that we have today. So Pascal mentioned some of the destructive testing that we've done. We've looked at the foundations now. We've done cores of them. We've had the opportunity to look at the river, the bottom of the river and the scour around the piers. We didn't have this information at that point. And so during the earlier stages of the strategy, we only had so much information from our visual condition assessments of the bridge. We now have a lot more detail. We've looked at every component.
Okay, thank you. And you mentioned the Ottawa Bridge. I'm also thinking of the Brooklyn Bridge, which is also like steel metal kind of crisscross type of design. That one is 143 years old, and it's just you don't hear about entire replacement. You know, like what are some other examples? You know, is it just a matter and level of investment?
I suppose to a degree, this is a bit of a matter of level of investment. With a significant amount of money, we can keep the high-level bridge, we can enhance the high-level bridge, but it would require significant investment, and it will only buy us a period of time. After 25 years, renewal would be, again, required, and would we be able to complete that renewal? We don't know. There's a lot of things about this bridge being 113 years old that we just can't answer what its future will be 25 years from now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I was on the board, so I will go next with questions.
I wanted to flip it a bit to, it seems like a footnote in this report, but I think it's where at Infrastructure Committee we need to dig in a little bit. Did I read this right around the Dawson Bridge that it was renewed in 2010, but we already need to extend its lifespan by 50 years, and we already need to renew it again within less than 15?
That's correct. We are currently doing some work right now, and that work is essentially the same thing, to buy ourselves some time to extend it until we have to do a more comprehensive rehab. Bridges of this nature and of this age or vintage, that one as well is over 100 years. Little known fact, it's actually 3 bridges that were cobbled together by a developer at the time to help with coal mining. So it's 3 bridges that were kind of bolted together, and basically and the city eventually took it over. So we are expected to, again, every 25 years, generally on average, you are expected to rehabilitate a bridge of this scale.
But this is earlier than anticipated if we're talking about doing it in the next budget cycle.
Like I said, it's 25 on average, and it may depend. Certainly when you get bridges that are over 100 years, it's probably short of 25.
Like, why are we not making the same recommendation? Like, based on what you're saying about it's like cobbled together, I know it's on the historic designation, but it seems like we are spending a lot of money on this bridge. We are trying to keep it going, but it doesn't seem like it's very much. The structural integrity doesn't seem to be there to actually live out that whole life cycle.
So you're right. The reason it's not documented in detail in this report is because we have further work to do. So we've looked at this bridge a few times over the last number of years leading to the rehabilitation work that's happening this year. Ultimately, what the recommendation will be over the next few years as we look in more detail, it may be a replacement of that bridge, it may be removal of that bridge, but we're not yet ready to get to that point. So we have, over the next 4 years, this bridge flagged for further study. Our delivery teams will be conducting the work to make sure that it continues to serve users, but ultimately what its recommendation will be, we're not sure. So more to come on the Dawson Bridge.
So as further actions from, like, if this is received for information today, when it comes to the Dawson Bridge, further exploratory work would happen before the budget debates or after? Because this is where, like, I think that, like, the rubber hits the road, right? Is like, we do all of these high-level estimates, and then we're seeing time and time again that those estimates are actually significantly higher than what is estimated. So is the Dawson Bridge going to have this information in advance of the budget, of any kind of further detailed understanding of this?
So the Dawson Bridge is almost complete, its rehab, and that will give us another 15 years of life. As we're moving forward and as we're doing this today, the kind of the pieces of information we're presenting today are really along that planning spectrum, and really looking at what are we talking about on very significant assets for our city. Down the road, we will be bringing forward things. So into the SCBA, we're bringing forward more information about the rehab on the low-hat level bridge as we get into different design, and we will have many decision points for council with increasing estimates.
Yeah, no, I get that. I guess I'm just trying to be a bit more strategic. And I'm worried about the operational costs. The report also highlighted the change in climate, the wear and tear that's having on our bridges. I'm understanding that you're going to bring forward a package specifically to enhance the monitoring of the high-level bridge over the next 4 years, which is going to cost us probably both capital and operating, I'm guessing?
Yes, it will be a mix, but we will be presenting it as a capital package.
Okay, it'll present as a capital. Okay, so I guess I'm just trying to understand the scope and scale of how many other bridges do we maybe not know the true sense of, like, are there going to be other surprises? Are there other things we're not thinking of? Should we be building even more bridges if we're already having this kind of infrastructure, like not replacing a current bridge, but we've talked about, you know,
many other bridges that could be in development in the works in the future? Like when are we having that conversation?
So, Councillor Rutherford, I think two things. The city has more than 300 bridges, so there will always be bridges that require replacement or rehabilitation, and that's why we continue to recommend funding the bridge renewal program at 100%.
You know what, I'll save it because I'm over time. Yeah. I'm gonna have to come back for another round anyway, so just keep that answer for the next round. Thank you. Mayor Knack?
I wasn't going to take all 5 minutes, so go ahead. You can go ahead and answer that question using my time.
Thank you, Mayor Knack. So where I was going is to say that we have over 300 bridges. We continue to invest significantly in those bridges. And so what we're hoping is that we can reassure council that we have our finger on the pulse when it comes to the asset management strategies. What we're bringing forward is that there are 3 significant bridges that would need to be discussed: the high level, the low level bridges, and then eventually the Dawson Bridge. We've put forward that we have completed rehabilitation on the Grote Road Bridge. Walter Dale has been replaced. We're working through Wellington. And so once those are completed, the bridges surrounding downtown are going to be at a state where we can take on high level and low level while having the rest of the infrastructure be stable. Dawson will need a decision eventually. We're seeing it outside of the timeline of the replacement of the high level and low level, but you are right, Councillor Rutherford, that it will come sooner rather than later. And as we're exploring what the rehabilitation was able to do, we'll need to come back to council with the strategy. The reality of Dawson is that it is quite different. It doesn't have the same significance through the transportation network and the economic impacts of it. And so the strategies may be different for Dawson, and we'll have to present that maybe in the next 10 years or so. So that could be the next investment that the city chooses to make or not.
Thanks for that. And yeah, just I know it's in the report, but I just want to say it out loud again. With all of these ones, the plan is to not do. Each one gets its own independent time. We're not doing high level and low level at the same time, or even like as part of this future Dawson. The plan is all of them will be independently done to help balance the traffic impacts.
That's right. So that's the plan that we've laid out in the report before you. We are committed to ensuring that the low level and high level bridge are not under construction and impacting traffic at the same time. And so you'll see that low level bridge northbound will be the first one to be undergoing rehabilitation starting in 2027 after the Dawson is done. And then following that, the high level bridge will be undergoing its maintenance and monitoring plan. There may be some work on the high-level bridge that happens around the same time as the low-level bridge, but we would be focusing that type of work on the non-traffic disrupting type of activity.
Absolutely, thank you. It's a great chart that you have in attachment 3 for those that need it. So a few more questions. I guess as we start thinking about that planning work, I think the part that the answers I'm hearing might be, for me, just the part I want to make sure we're having proper planning conversations, because I'm not sure there's going to be the opportunity for trade-offs for this connection, for the north-south, for the high level. So I want to make sure we're not planning for a trade-off conversation of do we choose between vehicle traffic, dedicated bus rapid transit, or active modes of transportation. Like, to me, those are non-negotiables. Those must be there. And therefore, when does that conversation happen to make sure that because the last thing I want is for this to have to come in at the 11th hour as you've started preliminary design and you're moving into detailed design. So there's going to be a point, I don't know if it's this council or the next council for that, but when would that happen? Do you have a sense of that?
Yes. And to confirm, we've been envisioning the future replacement of the high-level bridge continuing at that higher elevation, which I know is really important, and we heard from our speakers. We are contemplating vehicle traffic, active modes, and transit in the design. I think there are questions about how does this play into the province's plan. I think there are questions about, where do we work with things like the trolley? And that'll be a decision of council and the city.
And early enough that we're not
And
gonna
sorry,
be
your
adding it.
timeline.
Yeah.
Yes,
Just
4
'cause
years.
Yeah, okay, that's good.
In about 4 years.
Because something to me like the streetcar, like I'd rather go into that planning for that and be upfront with Edmontonians about the cost and showing them that here's the cost difference between this versus that. I think if we showed the math early on, there would be a desire to do that, but we need to make sure we're building that plan with that in mind so that folks can see that and we can go to them and say, hey, we know this is important to you. Here's how much additional that would cost over 100 years for this next bridge. And so that would be part of your thinking of the body of work.
Yes, and that'll be in about 4 years.
Great, so next council can tackle that officially, but there'll be some check-ins before. Thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you. Councillor Salvador?
Yeah, thank you. Similar questions just around some of those check-in points and decision points and when they would be in front of us. I specifically wanted to ask about sort of this question of the functional versus signature or anywhere in between. Obviously, high level is an iconic structure. So how are we envisioning the design process would weigh the appearance and design? And when would we be able to have those conversations with Edmontonians? How do we make sure that they're involved so that there is an opportunity to drive design beyond just functionality so that it has the opportunity to be a signature structure?
I think one of the pieces is we were trying to provide an order of magnitude estimate because we do need to keep that debt room. We need to look forward. In order to provide an order of magnitude estimate, we had to establish what we were estimating. And so that's where the functional came into that. In terms of the decision on what the bridge will be, that will absolutely be part of the overall design process. And I think all of us over here can know that that's an important bridge and that there will be an interest in exploring other designs. We just had to qualify what we were costing in the estimate.
Yeah, and totally understand that and that we're early in that process. But just looking for that surety that, you know, there will be opportunities for influencing design beyond just functionality and beyond capacity to accommodate various modes. And you know, would this follow a pretty extensive engagement process where Edmontonians can be brought into that? That's my understanding.
Councillor Salvador, I think those are all great questions that we would be happy to kind of provide clarity on as we get further into planning. And so, for example, if we follow the lead of Ottawa with the Alexander Bridge, they did do, how can I say this? They consulted with the public as well as Indigenous groups on the different designs. Those are all things that we can do. They take time, they take resources, and so what I would suggest is that we can commit to come back to council with a conversation around how do we want to do the planning and design of the high-level bridge and the low-level bridge. And so from that perspective, it would give us time to understand, and we're hearing you today as to what you see as important, and we can evaluate what that path could look like and what the touch points with council could be.
Great, okay, that's good to hear. Just two more questions. One of the speakers brought up potential opportunities to leverage the construction around low level into potentially reconfiguring roadway networks in that area. I just wanted to understand what work had been done to date. I think there was a reference to city-led work that had happened in that area. I don't know if you have information on that. And are we looking at how to improve the road network in that area if we're already in there doing construction?
Yeah, I think, Councillor Salvador, you're referring to the Mill Creek daylighting report, and so we're very well aware of that, and we will be looking to include the recommendations that were made in that report within the boundaries of the work that we have. And so, for example, the Mill Creek daylighting went much further south than what the bridge replacement project would look at, but in the immediate vicinity of the bridges, as we're looking at reconfiguring the what is now kind of freeway loop style kind of access, we would be looking to integrate that. So that would be for both ecological perspective, active modes, and ensuring that we can reclaim the land for the river valley.
And just, okay, so a question, that's good to hear. Okay, a question on that though, sometimes I find when we talk about the bounds of a project, right, there's a clearly defined line of where that would be. And I guess, is there value in looking at leveraging this opportunity to look at a further extent to be able to move forward on a project like the daylighting?
We can have that conversation with council at an appropriate time.
Okay, great.
Just on that note, the appropriate time will be during the concept planning phase for the project. Concept planning allows us that opportunity to look at the long term and really to lay out the broader plan, the broader dream for the project. Once we get into the later stages of design, that's when we start to set the boundaries of the project itself.
And I'll just make more of an infrastructure general comment. I think there was a trend in kind of the mid 2015-ish period of bundling a lot of things together. What we have now heard from industry is also a concern about capacity. And as we're starting to talk about more expensive generational investments in the billion-dollar range, we're going to also eventually, when we get from like the concept to the design to construction, we're going to have to talk about who can deliver and the capacity to deliver and how we're going to procure this and that kind of thing. So I think sometimes there's trade-offs between bundling a bunch of things into something like we have with our LRT projects, or coming up and having a really defined scope, because we might get better bidders in that. And I can say, like, the change in the construction industry from 2015 to 2025, 26 is very different in the industry. And we're going to have to keep our tabs on that going forward into the future. And so that's more of a delivery comment, but sometimes more isn't better in terms of having good competition of really strong firms for really important projects.
Thank you. Councillor Paquette.
Oh, thank you very much. So I'll just test this for administration. I think what I'm hearing, and I don't know if it's what you're hearing, is that councillors are looking at the opportunity afforded by this exploration and eventual investment as a way to sort of take a lot of the issues around there and in the River Valley and modes of transportation and provincial funding, all those things, and create a little bit of a master plan with a schedule and with different components that could be included in this larger look. Is this sort of what you're hearing as well?
Yes, Councillor Paquette, I think that's what we're hearing. And I think what we're also hearing is that we'll need to have a plan to bring decision-making points and milestones to council so that these decisions can be made with an understanding of what it means from a financial perspective, what it means for traffic management, what it means for all of the perspectives that we need to take into account when we plan our projects.
Yeah, of course. And so would you need a motion for something like that? Or is that something that you hear and you're like, you know what, this is absolutely within our scope and we can get that done? And the reason I ask is because sometimes in the past I've said, well, would you need a motion for that? And the answer is, oh, no, we got that. And then nothing happens. And so I'm just sort of wondering where we're at with this.
Councillor Paquette, I don't think we need a motion. I think we committed to bringing back a report about what the planning and design phase will look like. And we can certainly at that point take direction if council doesn't feel like we've provided either the necessary details or that direction is not quite what you'd like us to take. And so maybe that could be the moment where a motion could be made. But for now, we'll take away the commitment to bring back a report that will lay out what does planning and design look like for the low-level bridge and the high-level bridge over the next few years, and what decision points there will be for council.
And just to pause Councillor Paquette's time, sorry, Councillor Paquette. At Infrastructure Committee, what I've been clear on, though, is that if you want there to be a formal record of that, I would prefer a motion, even if it's for a memo or something that has been committed to, because the clerks have indicated to me that sometimes it is hard to track that, and then we do lose that along the way. So if it is something you really want to see, I would encourage you to think about a motion. We pause this, or can you put his time back to 3 minutes, please? Yep.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate that, because that is precisely my point. So, I'm glad to hear it. And I'll think about that, unless anyone else wants to jump in, which I'm very, very happy with. So the next thing is, talking about preservation of history. And, I think it's pretty clear that the cost implication, even just to maintain a pedestrianized high-level bridge, is maybe a little bit further than what a municipal budget alone can accommodate. It'd be great if we got provincial and federal dollars for that, but I'm wondering if there's a way to repurpose, and not structurally, but aesthetically, some elements of the high-level bridge into the design factors or aesthetics of a new bridge, even if it's like artwork or something added, some nod to the past.
I think, Councillor, this will be something that I'm excited to challenge, our design industry and have a conversation in future engagement with Edmontonians on, how do we honor that history but look into the future? And I'm always so impressed with what we get. It's nothing I could have thought of, but I do think that there'll be some really interesting innovations coming from our, design and engineering expertise.
Right. So sort of a bridge of Theseus taken to almost its ultimate extreme, I would guess, yeah?
Yeah, and if I can venture into a little bit of a fun fact, the bridge is so old that I found this very interesting. One of the components of the bridge could be used in medical because can you comment, Natalie?
The high-level bridge is made of pre-atomic steel, and so it's a very unique form of steel that can be used for other purposes that are really important to society.
That is a really, really fascinating aspect of it that I think we should explore going forward. That's really, really cool. I didn't even know that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Paquette. Councillor Jans?
Thank you. If I can put a motion on the table, I'm going to have a separate motion about releasing the private report, but that administration provide a memo detailing all north-south traffic counts, mode shift forecasts as we approach the 1.5, 1.75, and 2 million horizon, public transit expansion opportunities to reduce vehicle load, traffic pattern analysis, and current funding opportunities from current funding options from other orders of government to fund bridge crossings. By way of introduction.
I was going to say thank you, Councillor Jans. Would you like to introduce?
Yep, I'll just confirm the clerk has the most recent wording, if that works. Yeah, so what I'm just trying to do is, per the chair's instruction, some of the areas that I've heard major skepticism seems a hard word, but major curiosity about from community members is can we keep the high level bridge, and I hear in that conversation I think will be really better informed by that unsealing of the other report. But then the other piece is, what are we building for? I personally get nervous when I hear about commercial traffic coming down 109th Street and other pieces there. I'm worried about continued expansion of roadways in our city in general, and just our inability to continue paying for all of those roads, both in our financial budget and our carbon budget. I'm concerned about our climate emergency. I'm concerned about so many pieces here, and I'm trying to encapsulate all of these different pieces into getting more information, including really understanding the needs of our bridges, who are using them, when are they using them, and how we continue to make sure that everybody we can live in a city that's smooth to move, and just that cost benefit, that if for the cost of maybe a couple more LRT cars, how many more people can we move compared to another decision somewhere else? So think about all of that together, as well as, like, regardless of how this goes, this information will help us in our advocacy to the provincial and federal government, and will help make sure that we can justify to Edmontonians our decision making.
Thank you, Councillor Jans, for that introduction. Did you have any other questions about the report or about your motion?
Nothing further. I do have the wording about unsealing the other report, so.
That, we'll do that as a subsequent. But I do want to just allow, because we are at committee, so now if you have questions about the motion, feel free to ask questions about the motion. But if you still have questions you want to ask about the report, then feel free to do that too. So we'll leave that flexibility to do either or. And then we'll come back to voting on the report once all questions have been exhausted. So please go ahead, Councillor Wright.
Thank you for that flexibility, because lovely motion, but no questions on it until the report comes back. I'm sure there'll be tons. I'll just say one last question. The report also talks about there was 3 other occasions where the historic designation of a property had been removed. What are those? I just want to know what we're going to regret. No.
David, can you speak to that question, please?
Yes, absolutely, Councillor Wright. The first instance of that was in 1982 when the Tegler building downtown had its historic designation removed by City Council after protests from the property owner, and the building was subsequently demolished in later that year. The second instance was the Gem Theatre on Jasper Avenue east of 97th Street. The building was sold by the city to a private property owner who allowed the building to deteriorate, and it ultimately had to be demolished. And the designation bylaw was removed after several years of litigation. And the third instance just recently was the Hangar 11 building at Blatchford, which suffered the catastrophic fire in 2024, and City Council rescinded the designation bylaw on that site in September of last year.
Thank you very much. That kind of gives me an idea of sort of, I guess, the magnitude of some of these decisions. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Tang.
Yeah, great, thank you. So just in terms of, just so I'm clear, right now with this information, it won't be at least a few years before we can really engage the public about heritage, streetcar, traffic management for downtown, etc. We're looking at that 2031, 2034 timeline before engagement even starts, right?
Councillor Tang, we will be engaging sooner on the low-level bridge replacement and what that will look like and traffic management. And so the conversation with Edmontonians is starting today and will be ongoing for the next 10 to 15 years. If you're specifically referencing design choices related to the high-level bridge, you're correct that will be more in the 2030s.
Okay, great. And then I think you did say that you're going to bring back a plan for the design and how are you going to approach some of those in-depth engagement conversations. Did you say when that's coming back?
No, we haven't committed to a date. We're going to take it away and come back at an infrastructure committee potentially in 2026 or early 2027.
Okay. I know there's a number of organizations represented today, but I think the report also references the Radel Society. So just want to confirm that they will be certainly one of the key stakeholders in the whole high-level streetcar and crossing conversation from early on.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. And then just wanted to come back to the Ottawa Bridge because you mentioned that they're a few years ahead of us. Wondering if you are gleaning anything from their experience, anything you're learning about the approach, about the process that we can also adapt to the Edmonton context.
I think an interesting feature of that bridge is that it's entirely funded by the Government of Canada. But I'll turn it over to Pascal and Natalie.
Councillor Tang, we're certainly looking at the process that they undertook. Their decision-making was quite similar to ours, and they are a couple of years ahead, and so we'll be looking back as to what they've done, what their successes were, and what their lessons learned were, and we'll be looking to to get in touch with the project team to get more information about the process that they followed. But definitely there are some interesting elements as to how public they were about the decisions and the steps that they took for the planning and design.
That they were very public about the decisions and the cost and design, et cetera.
They
right?
did not speak very publicly of the cost. They gave a cost estimate range. So at this point in time, they're still talking about the bridge replacement will be between 150 and 800 million dollars, and they have not released the cost of that bridge yet.
Yeah, interesting. I was curious about how they were able to keep some of those heritage elements because the rendering for the new bridge doesn't look anything like it. And obviously, you mentioned earlier, we're not looking at a replica.
So that's correct. And yeah, the information that we got was that they mean to honor the heritage aspect. We haven't gotten to the details as to how they're doing that at this point in time.
Okay. And then I think this goes without saying, if we were to do the replacement bridge, these bridges would be lasting another over 100 years minimum, right? That's sort of the life expectancy.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you very much for all the answers. I look forward to some more information when it returns. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tang. I'll go next. I'm gonna harp on this again because I feel like the answer I got in today is different than what's in the report. So in the report it says, due to the scope and the scale of these bridge replacement projects and their forecasted cost over the next several budget cycles, support from other orders of governments will be required. And what I heard in the answer today was that we are hopeful for it, but it's not necessary. Which is it?
I think, Councillor Rutherford, we want to reflect the fact that this is a generational investment. And so generally when Edmonton has made that kind of investment, we've done it with other levels of government. LRT, Yellowhead, Terwilliger. Should we be put in a position where no other levels of government is ready to support? We could, but I think that would put a strain on the city's resources. And so that was what we reflected in the report. Additionally, should we have conversations about supporting other priorities related to provincial or federal agendas, then that would definitely push that conversation even further into needing support financially for those projects.
Okay. So if I'm sort of summarizing, it will be required to not have to compromise further on other network components that we may have foresee in the future.
Yeah, I think the capital investment outlook laid it out for the city of Edmonton. Right now, we're only able to invest approximately 25 to 30% of our ideal renewal. Every decision we make on infrastructure affects what we are doing on one project and what we're not able to do on another project as we're running a significant portfolio of assets.
Yeah, and I guess this is where I come back to then, because the one thing we're doing is 100% replacement renewal on, the only thing that's at ideal level is a neighborhood and bridges, correct?
Well, the neighborhood renewal program was set based on the ideal, a decade or so ago, and it has not caught up with inflation, and so it's not really at 100%.
That's right, but bridges are 100%.
And that would represent regular maintenance and rehab. We would say that this generational of significant bridges is outside of that, which is why there's an additional report coming forward and a plan around it.
Yes, no, I get that. I guess what I'm trying to get at is we're talking about also asset rationalization. And would it not be the most impactful to actually talk about asset rationalization around our bridges, since they are the 100% funded replacement, and they seem to be, again, especially as they're aging and we're changing and we're hearing about the cost of maintenance, like, wouldn't that be the best place? Like, I know we're not focusing there in our rationalization as a first step, but shouldn't it be?
So, Councillor Rutherford, We definitely are looking at asset rationalization, applying the framework more on a case-by-case basis for bridges. And so when they come up for a significant investment, we are reviewing if they are required. And we did that for the low-level and the high-level bridge. During the network analysis, we modeled, can we remove them? Could we not replace them? And not just from a vehicular traffic perspective, right? It impacts pedestrians, it impacts cyclists, it impacts mass transit. And in the case of the low-level and the high-level bridge, the network analysis came back and was definitely, with a definite need to replace them to support all modes across the river. But we are taking that lens when we are making significant investments. We have not gotten to large bridges, but we have started with some of the smaller pedestrian bridges, unfortunately, that are redundant to the network. We are we've already demolished 6. And we are taking that lens and also looking at rationalization may not be a full, like we're not replacing, but it could be replacing it with a different profile, less structure, making good life cycle decisions.
And if I can just add, we also work really closely with our program areas. And so I think there's what services are required of the city specifically to operate. We don't have another, level of government or someone else coming in to build a bridge. And so we would say that that's part of our core services.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I think Stevenson was only on her second round, so it goes Councillor Stevenson.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just very briefly to administration, with this memo, I think this will be really, really helpful. And is that an opportunity to dig into, this idea of a downtown access and mobility plan in particular? Just to understand how people and goods are coming to the core as part of this information.
I just wanted to check, did Pablo, are you able to join the call from UP?
Yes, I'm here. So Pablo Orozco with Planning Environment Services. Just looking at the motion, we'd have to see, I would prefer to connect with my IS folks and see what information is available and what information has been completed as part of the bridge renewal. But we're continuously doing network analysis work for the downtown policy update. We just completed some. So there's just a few moving parts that I would like to kind of see how we're connecting on this and digest the motion a little bit. But I think there is opportunity to see how movement of the city's mobility network is currently performing.
Great, yeah, and I think this would provide some of that baseline information to help inform those policies and plans. Is that correct?
Councillor Stevenson, it's Pascal. If I can just jump back in, I think our plan for the memo was to respond in a timely manner with information that's available, and then we can add, as Pablo was mentioning, kind of information about what else will be at play over the next few years, and that would be weaved in or come out of the discussions related to these projects. And we can include that idea of like downtown access into that and speak to what it could look like and how it could take form following this initial memo.
Great, that sounds really wonderful. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. Councillor Salvador.
Yeah, thank you. Two more questions, a little bit more future focused. So happy if we can dig into these in future opportunities. But just on funding, we've been having a fair number of conversations about user fees recently, and just wanted clarity. Are we allowed to incorporate tools for new bridges to help offset costs, or is that tool not available to us provincially?
So we did follow up on the concept of tolls, and we've consulted with a few folks about it. Under the Traffic Safety Act currently, it does prohibit municipalities from charging tolls on our roads and bridges. We currently don't have the legislative authority to impose a road toll on any thoroughfare, street, road, and so on at this point in time. What else? Well, the 2020 Financial Alberta Strategic Transportation Act contemplates the ability to impose tolls on new infrastructure as long as a free alternative exists. It doesn't give cities or municipalities this power and only applies to the government of Alberta.
Okay. On the passenger rail plan, just given, and again, this is future focus, but given the existing approach and geometry of the alignment in this area, how much work have we done to even understand what's achievable in this location?
Nothing is confirmed. The province is leading the work on that. If the committee wanted to go into private, we could discuss more.
Okay, I'll hold off for now. Just recognizing that work is eventually going to be coming to us and is being led by the province. Thanks.
Thank you. Just a couple quick questions I think I should be able to complete quickly. I just wanted to confirm that the capital profile that's coming to budget, is it with pay-as-you-go?
For clarity, Councillor Rutherford, you mean the northbound low-level bridge rehabilitation?
No, I'm talking about the one that's needed for the maintenance and monitoring, enhanced maintenance and monitoring of the high-level bridge.
The anticipation, and this still needs to be confirmed with Finance and Council, of course, is that it would be rolled into a debt-funded package that would include all costs related to the bridge replacements. So including the planning and design for the low-level bridge and the holding room for its eventual construction, and then the planning and design of high-level bridge.
How can we do that? Because my understanding is we had to not use debt servicing for things like maintenance and monitoring.
I think to clarify, Councillor Rutherford, we do ongoing maintenance now. So we do about $500,000 on average every single year for the high-level bridge as a standalone bridge. That's operating dollars for that. What is being proposed through this profile is that it's an enhancement of that. So it's more touch points, it's more inspections. There's going to be certain specific types of interventions on the abutments, et cetera. That's what's part of this profile. So they're different. It's being called maintenance, but it's actually an enhancement of that, more along the lines of a capital profile.
Yes.
And
I understand that. I'm getting to the point of when we have tried to use debt servicing as council in the past for capital projects, we are told that it is not possible to use debt servicing for certain scopes of work. This feels like it's in the scope of work that I've been told in the past is not acceptable for debt servicing. So I'm wondering how we would be proposing that as debt servicing and not pay as you go.
So I've just confirmed with finance, you can use debt servicing if it extends its life.
Okay. I'll leave it there for now, but I probably will have further questions on that when it comes to budget time. And with that, are there anybody else with any questions on the motion or would like to speak to this motion? I'm not seeing any, so please vote on the motion on the floor.
I mean, yes.
Thank you, Councillor Jans. We have all the votes.
Please display the votes. Okay, perfect. And can I just take a motion to extend orders? I believe there's just a couple other supplements we can do quickly. Okay, so we're just moving to extend orders to finish any subsequents on this item and finish the agenda.
So moved.
Okay, please vote.
I mean, yes.
Yes.
Thank you. We'll just get the vote up. We have all the votes.
Please display the votes. And that is carried. Okay, Councillor Jans, I'll go back to you. I know you had another motion, and I believe Councillor Paquette then had one.
Yep. Can I just look to the clerk for the final wording of what for the unsealing the report motion, please?
Yeah, it's via email here, but that administration review and redact the April 2nd, 2025 Integrated Infrastructure Services Report IIS 02964 and release a redacted report as soon as possible.
Thank you. So as worded, this allows us to, we don't have to select the infrastructure report at council, just by, it'll happen if we.
Oh, sorry, to clarify, so if you did it as a notice of motion, that would avoid
So
it. But you don't have to select it at council, it just as a notice of motion would avoid that option. But you can make it as part of this item too.
Just recommend.
So moved then, and we'll proceed as planned. Yep, nothing further.
Okay. So that would be that the administration recommend to council? Just to
Correct,
clarify.
yeah, we'll just get that up there. It needs to recommend to city council since it was executive committee that decided to make it private to begin with.
Okay, sounds good. Councillor Paquette, you have questions on the motion or just on the board for your motion next?
Yeah, that's for the next.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions on this motion? So this will be going to council, and any councillors listening, you do not have to select this item unless you do not want to keep it in private. So just want to put that out there. Please vote.
I'm a yes.
We have all the votes.
Please display the votes. And that is carried. And now I will go to Councillor Paquette.
Well, thank you. Yeah, the administration provided a report detailing elements that could be part of the central area bridge replacement projects, including but not limited to reorientation of roadways to simplify and optimize Edmonton's transportation corridors, dilating Mill Creek, encouraging multimodal transportation, etc., due Q2 2027 to Infrastructure Committee.
Would you like to introduce?
Sure. No, this just comes out of the conversation and questions that we had during this conversation. And, essentially what we also heard from speakers and what we're hearing from the general public is that if we were doing this, it would be great to have an opportunity to take a look at a number of different projects that probably need some attention that would all be fairly interrelated to the larger bridge work.
Sorry, I accidentally pressed. I'm not on the board. Anyone else on the board for questions? Okay, please vote. I'm sorry, Councillor Paquette, I forgot to give you an opportunity to close, but I'm guessing you're fine without closing. So, thanks.
And we have all the votes.
Okay, please display the votes. And that is carried. And there are no responses to in-council inquiries. There are no private reports. No motions pending. Are there any notices of motion or motions without customary notice? Seeing none, we are adjourned at 12:03. Thank you.